Well, anyway, you wrap up. What am I saying?
I think we continue to go off the deep end here.
Oh, you want to keep going?
There were 7 points. That was number 6.
Okay.
So nobody's going to read this, so we should read it to them. So let's go back to the beginning.
Let's go.
And then let's see where this leads us.
Number 1. This is Generation Health. We bring you the latest news, cutting-edge research, and time-tested best practices, helping you live a longer, healthier life. Today's episode is going to be chock full. We have a conversation that Dante and I had about the ketogenic diet and some results from a whole big study about athletic performance, how the ketogenic diet affects or doesn't athletic performance. You have to watch that to find out. And what's in the bottle? Joey talks about Mag Essentials, one of our core products, something that is never out of stock at my house. I take these every day now after having this conversation. Mag Essentials, what's in the bottle? Joey's going to give us the details. It's old news at this point, but I couldn't let it go without sharing in case you missed it. Costco, the warehouse retailer personally responsible for an enormous percentage of my family's annual spending, was forced to recall a shocking 80,000 pounds of butter. What in the world would cause such a massive recall? Did an unfortunate worker fall in the vats? Was it a brain-eating bacteria? No, it was none of those things. It was, in fact, nothing at all wrong with the butter itself. So why the dramatic action? Well, the FDA flagged the product for immediate, quote, class 2 recall when it was discovered that nowhere on the packaging were the words, quote, contains milk, unquote. That's right. A simple design oversight on the part of a product packaging designer resulted in the recall of almost $320,000 worth of butter. It's worth noting that cream, and then in parentheses, milk, close parentheses, was listed as the first ingredient on all of these packages, but the regulation requires that it has to have a second line below the ingredients that states contains milk. So, in the interests of being informative and helpful, we want to inform our listeners, butter contains milk. In fact, if unsalted, it will likely be the only ingredient. The same is true of cheese, yogurt, paneer, creamed corn, white gravy, and ice cream. Write it down, make a note. Don't allow yourself to be caught off guard by any future mislabeled butters. Also, if you're looking to hire a product packaging designer, there's probably one looking for a new job. Hair loss is a frustrating problem that affects some 80 million Americans. Globally, hair loss treatments are a nearly $12 billion market, at least that's what it was in 2024. Minoxidil, also known as Rogaine, is one of the most commonly used medications to help. When used topically, it is simply massaged into the scalp and helps dormant hair follicles to re-enter the anagen, or growth phase, that they have fallen out of. Unfortunately, the desire of some parents to keep their hair seems to have had an unfortunate side effect on their children. Werewolf syndrome, or the technical name, hypertrichosis, is when children develop abnormal tufts of hair across their body, sometimes including on their faces. There have been fewer than 100 documented cases of werewolf syndrome worldwide, and it is generally a genetic disorder, which is why it was so shocking when 11 children in Spain all developed it in just the last year. After investigation, it turned out that each of the cases involved a parent that was using over-the-counter minoxidil on themselves. Inadvertently, traces of it was still on their hands, and it was getting onto or into their babies' mouths, which was how the babies were growing all of that hair. Thankfully, in every case in Spain, the baby's unwanted hair receded when caregivers stopped using topically applied minoxidil solutions. If you are using a medicated scalp treatment to keep your hair, please make sure that you are washing your hands and waiting at least 20 minutes before touching your baby. The International Society of Sports Nutrition
put out a position on ketogenic diets.
Okay.
And so position statements are pretty big.
Yeah. This is them officially.
They all came down. They all joined together at the big round table.
Yeah.
And they were like, we're going to talk about the keto diet.
We're going to talk about this. And they all agreed.
And they all ate avocados and butter.
Yeah. Put it in their coffee.
It was awesome.
Bulletproof coffee.
Mm-hmm.
What did they say?
This point sums up my stance on it.
Oh boy.
When compared to a diet higher in carbohydrates and lower in fat, a ketogenic diet may cause greater losses in body weight, fat mass, and fat-free mass, but may also heighten losses of lean tissue.
Okay.
However, this is likely due to differences in calorie and protein intake, as well as shifts in fluid balance. So it's basically saying that
better than I thought it was going to be.
Sure. But it's basically saying that if you were to equate things like caloric intake and protein intake, a lot of these differences come out in the wash.
Yeah.
And so it's not a fun answer, but every time, I mean, a lot of times our staff asks this kind of question. What do you think about this diet? What about that diet? What are you doing? What? And it's like, hold on. Do you want my help? Do you just want me to state some facts? Like, right. I can't get a read for what people want when they ask those questions. And do
you really want my opinion?
Right. And so I answer basically the question with kind of that point. Yeah. There's 6 other points in this consensus position stand, but mine always comes around to that point because people often ask it in, is this going to help me lose weight quicker than something else? Because that's what I can hear them saying that's what they care about most.
Yeah.
And so what I deduce from that is when you equate the things that actually matter, like caloric intake or protein intake, let's say, again, those big time outcomes tend to come out in the wash.
So let me make sure I'm understanding the current state of nutritional science. My understanding is that what did you call it? The caloric model of weight
from a while back.
Yeah, something like that. That a calorie is a calorie is a calorie. That when it comes to gaining or losing weight, it's more or less a math problem. Did you eat more than you exerted? Then you're going to gain. Did you exert more than you ate? Then you're going to lose. Is it a deficit or what's the other word?
A surplus.
Surplus. Thank you. Right. But beyond that, when it comes to lifestyle preference or feelings of satiation or other goals like maintaining muscle mass, that there are some things that might be better suited for that than others, and it might be highly individualized. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to weight control and management, it's math. Is that fair?
I think it's fair.
Okay.
But even we could take that into a handful of different directions.
Right. Because we're talking about things like NEAT, non-exercise, active thermogenesis.
Yes. And ultimately, if we were to view our bodies more like a combustion engine, like a car, then yes, that's certainly a helpful starting place. Calories in, calories out. What's your total daily, not just your total daily, but what's your total weekly and monthly intake like relative to what you're burning or conserving? So sure, when you match calories for a given diet, generally you're going to see similar amounts of weight loss occur to crystallize your point.
So going back to the keto thing, it's the 1980s low fat, high carbohydrate diets matched calorie for calorie would have roughly the same results as a keto diet matched calorie for calorie, which would have the same results roughly as a carnivore diet if you wanted to do that.
Yep. And that's if we're just looking at how much weight is somebody losing, gaining, or maintaining.
Right. But there are many other factors to suggest that, hey, you should probably, in the case of carnivore, you should probably eat some vegetables. Some healthy fruits and vegetables would not be a bad idea.
Right. I think that's a great way to launch some of that conversation, because I think it helps initially, again, to understand that calories in, calories out matter. Think about it in a very mechanical sense. That helps. But then just know when you take it a step further, that's where the can of worms opens up. It's certain people, there's a certain genetic predisposition to how you respond to a calorie surplus or a calorie deficit. And you're just in these million different signals, your environment, all these things come in, how you maybe you start fidgeting less, or not even just fidgeting less. You start to just you start to move less in general. You're more sedentary to make up for it. And so your body's always
totally subconsciously.
Yes, totally. That's the key point, is people think that a lot of this is in their conscious control. And while I am a proponent of controlling what you can control, there are so many other things at play that I think afford people the grace to understand that we're not combustion engines. Just use that as your fundamental launch point for picking a target of how much to eat.
And so beyond that, when you're picking an eating style, let's stop calling it a diet. When you're picking a way to eat, one of the major factors is what works for you. What is going to help you feel full? What is going to help you avoid the traps of, junk food sounds great right now, or whatever. Taking it out of that math situation and realizing there's a human element to it.
Exactly. Because ultimately the less, and you, I think you're an outlier, as you've been somebody who has been able to, that's right. You've been able to begin tracking calories, weighing food. You do it on the road. You've built a pretty admirable set of skills that not many people can maintain outside of their bubble. So much to fall back on, again, when you are traveling, when you are doing other things, that for a lot of people, they're just never going to get there. So I like that you said, what style do you ascribe to that's ultimately going to lead you to an amount of calories that you don't have to worry about, but you're always kind of maintaining your weight, or a pound or two starts to come off pretty easily. And it's not this overly analytical thing. As much as I would love to tell people to do what you do, download MyFitnessPal, download this tracker or macro factor, and just start learning about the amounts that are in foods. Well, for you, that worked great. And you and I connect on that, but there's a lot of people who are like, what?
It worked great at 41 years old. After decades of hating what was going on with me, and then being forced by God to sit next to you constantly and hear, oh, wait, so I really could just do this and learn these things and it might actually work. And lo and behold, it worked. But no, you're right. This is a version of me that I never thought I would experience in terms of tracking food and all that stuff. It's a major shift. But not for everybody.
It is certainly, you have found your style. Because there are elements that I see that there's certain times where, now that you understand the makeups of certain foods, because you stylistically were keto at one point, you were stylistically eating more meat at one point, or whatever it is. Now you can mix and match those different things that on a given day, if you got off to a rough start and you were super high in carbs. Well, you know what? I know all the foods and all the things that I need to do by 6, 7 PM that can rebalance the scale. So
absolutely.
But it has all led you to this. What is it? The Maslow's hierarchy of needs or whatever. You're completely enlightened.
I've ascended. I have ascended. This is why we talked about this, was that you could talk about how awesome I am.
That's right.
No. So that's fantastic. So there's an official position statement, and the punchline is it's a diet plan. And if you just take care of yourself, it'll be okay. But you can also do it. And that was always one of my gripes with people when they'd say, oh, I'm doing keto. What are you eating? Cheeseburgers without the bun. Bro, that is not keto. That is not how you're supposed to do that. Like, that's not any healthy diet anywhere. Well, anyway, you wrap up. What am I saying?
I think we continue to go off the deep end here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was only, like I said, there were 7.
Oh, you want to keep going?
There were 7 points. That was number 6.
Okay.
So nobody's going to read this, so we should read it to them.
Okay.
So let's go back to the beginning.
Let's go.
And then let's see where this leads us.
Number 1.
Number 1, a ketogenic diet induces a state of nutritional ketosis, which is generally defined as serum ketone levels above 0.5 millimoles.
Mm-hmm.
While many factors can impact what amount of daily carbohydrate intake will result in these levels, a broad guideline is a dietary carbohydrate intake of less than 50 grams per day. This is the launch point. What the heck is this talking about? That's the ketogenic diet. That's ketosis. Let's not talk about a low carb diet. Let's talk about what ketogenic diet is, right?
Yeah. So for those that don't know, ketosis is functionally, it's a state that your body can go into when you are so lacking in carbohydrates, blood sugar, glucose, that your body switches into burning its own fat stores for survival. And it's got all kinds of fun side effects, like they've tested and shown increased visual acuity. You can see a little bit sharper. Your brain moves a little bit faster. Likely because, in theory, if you're super hungry and you haven't eaten in a while, your body's like, hey, you're going to need to hunt and you're going to need to figure that out right now.
Sure.
So we're going to amp everything up. What your body is not really intended to do is stay in this place for years and years on end, which is what I did. I was hardcore keto for 5 years. But that's what you're talking about. And the measurement is ketones in the blood serum. Mm-hmm. There's strips you can get where you can do a pee test.
So you can determine exactly where you are.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you can figure out, oh, I ate a banana. That was too many carbs. I can't do that again. I'm going to have to cut back to half a banana. That's actually a conversation I had with my wife once upon a time. I'm glad to no longer have those conversations. But yeah, okay. So that's and you don't just drop in and out of it. When you go into ketosis, it takes your body like 18 to 24 hours minimum to kind of flip into it.
Okay.
And if your body is not adapted to it, it's jarring.
Huh.
You can get nauseous. You get brain fog. It's not a pleasant experience.
Sounds great.
Yeah. But once you're there, you're good to go.
Yeah.
Until you come out again, and then that's why, I've had friends that go, "Hey, I'm doing keto. Well, I cheated a little this afternoon, but I allow myself one thing a day." And it's like, that's literally not how this works.
If we're trying to be technical, you're not.
That's not ketosis. That's a low carb diet,
right?
But that's not ketosis,
right? And for context, I like that you mentioned the banana example. So for a standard banana, there's 27 grams of carbohydrate.
Too much.
Exactly. And the cut point, about 50 grams per day.
Yeah.
So that's less than 2 bananas a day worth of carbohydrates.
I found out I could eat 50 or more carbs a day, but it had to be less than 20 grams at a time. If I kept it under 20, I could stay in ketosis without any issues.
See, right, that you've always been a master micromanager. I mean, it all makes sense.
Oh my god!
But you saw the light and
moved on.
Yeah.
What's point 2?
Point 2, nutritional ketosis achieved through carbohydrate restriction and a high dietary fat intake is not intrinsically harmful and should not be confused with ketoacidosis, a life-threatening condition most commonly seen in clinical populations and metabolic dysregulation. So essentially, your body does not have enough insulin to allow blood sugar into the cells for energy. Instead, the liver breaks down fat for fuel, which produces acids called ketones. When too many ketones build up in the body too quickly, it can lead to DKA. Point 3, a ketogenic diet has largely neutral or detrimental effects on athletic performance compared to a diet higher in carbohydrates and lower in fat.
Makes sense.
Despite achieving significantly elevated levels of fat oxidation during exercise at about 1.5 grams per minute. Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So,
but they said it's neutral or detrimental to performance.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That makes sense.
And so again, we are talking about the International Society of Sports Nutrition. We're not talking, this isn't the Board of Clinical Nutrition. This is a sporting context.
Right.
And so
run faster, jump higher. You probably won't if you're in ketosis.
Right. And there's even a point to distinguish there that if you're a more on the recreational end of the spectrum of endurance athletics, that maybe I would wager to say that that a diet like this might even be less detrimental than if you were somebody who's like at the top end running ultra marathons and your income and pride depends on running it in 2 minutes less or whatever. So number 4, the endurance effects of a ketogenic diet may be influenced by both training status and duration of the dietary intervention, but further research is necessary to elucidate these possibilities. All studies involving elite athletes showed a performance decrement from a ketogenic diet, all lasting 6 weeks or less. Of the 2 studies lasting more than 6 weeks, only one reported a statistically significant benefit of a ketogenic diet. So I think that kind of said what we just said.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. Even having loved being in ketosis, it does not surprise me in the slightest that a performance athlete would see a decline in their performance in ketosis, especially for a long period of time.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Number 5.
Well, this is fun.
A ketogenic diet tends to have similar effects on maximal strength or strength gains from a resistance training program compared to a diet higher in carbohydrates. However, a minority of studies show superior effects of non-ketogenic comparators.
Okay, so again, it's neutral or slight decrement, but not a big deal either way. Okay.
So we talked about point number 6, just to remind folks.
Yep, read it again.
When compared to a diet higher in carbohydrates and lower in fat, a ketogenic diet may cause greater losses in body weight, fat mass, and fat-free mass, but may also heighten losses of lean tissue. However, this is likely due to differences in calorie and protein intake, as well as shifts in fluid balance.
Yep.
Basically, I think that last part, to help people understand that a little better too, is just that whenever you, and Tyler can speak to this from practical experience, I would say, that initial jolt of weight loss is significant. The glycogen stores in the muscle and the liver are essentially depleted right off the bat as you...
That's that first 24 to 48 hours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you'll see, and because of the water associated with that, the changes in fluid balance, you'll see the number on the scale move quickly.
Right.
But again, it levels off as you enter what this new norm is.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a psychological perspective, it really helps if you're trying to change your life to see a big shift when you go through something as radical as I'm never ever again eating a bowl of rice, it helps.
Yeah. I think that also speaks to what bodybuilders do. That's not my bag.
No.
But they play with carb cycling and change the amounts of carbohydrates substantially, or at least they historically did that.
Yeah, they do.
So that you can experience these drastic changes because of all the water that comes with it.
Yep.
And the more, not that they're dehydrated, many of them are, but as more water comes off, more of the muscle can be seen. You appear more vascular. And so
celebrities talk about, I've seen a lot of celebrities like Hugh Jackman talk about that when he was playing Wolverine, that if it's a day when he has to have his shirt off, like don't talk to him because he hasn't had any water to drink for like 72 hours.
Yeah.
And he's grumpy and angry and he has a pounding headache, but he's going to get the shot where he takes his shirt off and he's going to look amazing.
That's right.
And then he's going to go eat some things that he probably shouldn't and put his shirt back on, and then he'll be happier again.
All the finer things that those whose income depends on it have to worry about.
Yeah. Yeah. If you make 7 figures because you did that, then knock yourself out.
Yeah. So the last point, number 7, there is insufficient evidence to determine if a ketogenic diet affects males and females differently. However, there is a strong mechanistic basis for sex differences to exist in response to a ketogenic diet. There's always something that you're not consciously thinking of, because my initial reaction is why in the world would something like that matter?
Mm-hmm. Once again, we need more data.
Yeah.
So what's your punchline? You going to start keto tomorrow?
No.
Me neither.
Yeah. My punchline is, obviously there's going to be somebody more attuned to picking apart a paper like this, who's going to go through the whole thing and give you a little bit more than what we did, at least at the outset. But in general, we have to know that, again, this is coming from a sports, viewing a lot of this through the athletic lens, the sports lens, which it's hard to completely dissociate sport from lifestyle, in my opinion. Like, at what point when you're exercising, are you sporting versus exercising for longevity?
Right.
Which drives me a little bit nuts.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of this stuff, there's just the inevitable overlap. So with that said, we didn't get into what is this doing for cardiovascular health? What is this doing for somebody who has a family history of high cholesterol, hyperlipidemia, familial hypercholesterolemia, all these things that we know for sure are worth addressing and worth knowing sooner than later. So how does a diet, when you unpack what it contains, a diet that invariably, because options become limited, is invariably high in something like saturated fat, which is one of the drivers for elevated cholesterol, elevated issue with cardiovascular disease and metabolic diseases.
Right.
So what do I say from that standpoint? I just think it depends on the person, and you have to really look at the nuts and bolts of that individual, because things can go south if it is somebody who is more predisposed to cholesterol issues. For example. And that's just one piece of the puzzle. So overall, you would have to have a really good reason in that this is something that you know would help you maintain a more sustainable caloric intake.
It did. It helped me radically, and it helped me get some control. I will say this, if nothing else, not having anything sweet for, I don't think I had anything sweet for probably 4 or 5 months when I first started doing it. And then tasting raspberries again was a mind-blowing experience. And it helped me to reestablish a healthier relationship with sweet things than before. But I think it seems like it's kind of that same conversation of like the GLP-1 agonists or any of a number of things where you have to weigh it out and you go, is this going to help you live longer because it'll reduce this other issue over here?
Right.
Where is the risk benefit on this? And can you pay attention to your numbers? Watch your cholesterol. Does it start to jump? Okay, maybe it's time to find a new way to eat. I don't know. Yeah. What do I know?
No, you certainly have a lot to offer in this respect.
This one very niche topic.
An interesting way to tie this all together without completely unpacking another study. But I think it's always good to just quickly step outside the narrow focus that we were in for just a moment. One of my friends sent me a podcast talking about this study. Of course, it was a Simon Hill podcast, who, in my estimation, is one of the best in the business. But the study that they talked about, which and from other individuals has gotten some hype. It's titled Dietary Protein Intake in Midlife in Relation to Healthy Aging, Results from the Prospective Nurses Health Cohort Study. So they looked at like 3,300 individuals, and they had all these different ways to connect protein intake with healthy aging, essentially. Mm-hmm. And just to read the conclusion of the abstract here, dietary protein, especially plant protein in midlife, is associated with higher odds of healthy aging with several domains of positive health status in a large cohort of female nurses. And so, again, what are we, just like we're the abstract people, we're just just hitting people with headlines and abstracts, but those guys can explain it better than I could. So you should go listen to it. But my point is you listen to or you read a position statement on the ketogenic diet, which I think gave a pretty fair assessment of the positives and the negatives and how it affects performance mainly. And then you look at something like this on the flip side, theoretically, of something like healthy aging. And now this is not apples to apples. We're not talking about the ketogenic diet, but we are talking about a certain type of protein over the lifespan that's being consumed more than others. I mean, so in looking at what's commonly associated with a ketogenic dietary pattern, for most people, it is a higher percentage of animal proteins. Well, on the flip side, you look at this healthy aging study, which I think the vast majority of people care more about healthy aging than what's their ultra marathon endurance time.
Sure.
We see a bias towards consuming higher amounts of plant protein. And so I just think there's more of these arrows pointing us away from diets like a ketogenic diet high in animal proteins.
Yeah.
A carnivore-like diet that's high in animal proteins. Something that's a little more varied, a little more dispersed, like we often talk about. But again, when you see all these arrows, not necessarily saying the same thing, pointing at the same thing, but just kind of like leaning in the same direction, I just think you have to be careful, and you don't use a position statement or one study or one thing to hang your hat on necessarily, but you can theoretically take a step back forever and ever and ever and never make a decision on anything.
Right.
But in general, I like to jump to something like a healthy aging study like this that was fresh on my mind when we're thinking about animal proteins and such. And when you hear people who have had several domains of their health be positively affected by a certain dietary style that looks not a whole lot like a ketogenic diet or a carnivore-like diet, then maybe you just consider that before you ascribe to something very black or white.
Love it. Love it. Thanks, brother. That was fun. Joey, it is time for What's in the Bottle once again. What are we talking about today?
Magnesium.
Magnesium. We love magnesium in my house. So I don't need to pay attention to any of this because I actually know all about it already. So
you can talk actually then. Go ahead.
No, I'm not.
I'll host.
That is not happening. Never, ever, ever. Nobody wants to hear my opinions. Okay, so tell me about magnesium. We've got a couple of different versions, right?
Yes. Yeah. So we'll kind of start with the basics of what does magnesium do in the body. Magnesium is needed for more than 300 biochemical reactions in the body.
Oh, that's all.
Helps to maintain normal nerve and muscle functioning, support a healthy immune system, even has effect on the rhythm of the heart, and the heartbeat, and helps bones as well. We always associate calcium. That's definitely the main driver, but magnesium is a significant component as well. Also helps adjust and regulate blood glucose levels, and it's involved in energy production. It's involved in 80% of the body's metabolic reactions. So if you are experiencing low magnesium, what may be some of the manifestations of that?
Yep.
Muscle spasms and tightness, muscle weakness, tremors, as well as things like menstrual cramps, constipation, headaches, fatigue, palpitations, as well as psychologically, you could be having some sleep disturbances, low mood, anxiety, and irritability. Over time, if you're deficient consistently, more in a chronic state, there is association with type 2 diabetes, severe PMS, arrhythmias, high blood pressure, and then again, more from the psychological end, depressive disorders, anxiety disorders, ADHD.
Wow.
So there's acute links as well as chronic links.
Really, really important mineral, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I can eat this, right? This is something I can eat in food.
Yes. And I think this one's, when you get into herbs, things can get a little bit more, what does this do? But when you're talking about something as basic as magnesium, and rightfully so, mine kind of goes to, well, I can get that from my diet.
Yeah.
And you can, but there are a few layers and issues with it. So first of all, the sources, nuts and seeds, green leafy vegetables, and whole grains. I emphasize whole. So if those are a heavy part of your diet, you're way ahead of the game. If you're not, there's not a ton else out there that's really going to give you anything unless it's fortified.
Got it.
So how much of these foods are you really eating? A, and then B, the food itself. So there was a 2016 study done just in wheat comparing magnesium levels. So in 1968, they have baseline magnesium levels. They reevaluated them in 2015, just from what's currently done in the same area, things like that. They found that magnesium content was 19.6% lower.
Whoa.
That was one very large study. Some studies, smaller studies, go up to 80% since the 1950s, an 80% decrease. You say, why? It has to do, not surprisingly, with mass production, but more specifically, use of fertilizers. So the fertilizers themselves. So those green leafy vegetables, those nuts, those seeds, those whole grains, everything I just mentioned is affected by our farming practices, agricultural practices, and the fertilizers we use. So right there.
So get it in your diet, but also you're going to have to eat potentially 5 times as much of this stuff as you used to get the same amount.
In the 1950s, your bar to clear how much, the magnesium amount that you need, your intake is now much higher.
Got it. Okay.
So there's also significant decrease in cooking.
Okay.
As well as, and that's why I emphasized whole grains, 80 to 95%, depending on the grain itself, is lost when it's processed into a simple grain, or it's not the whole grain when you remove the germ.
Wow.
So that's again why I keep emphasizing the word whole. And also, very importantly, contributing to magnesium deficiency or medications, things that are pretty difficult variables to change. Commonly used medications, metformin, antibiotics, certain blood pressure medications like calcium channel blockers, diltiazem, and amlodipine, commonly used. Diuretics, Lasix, hydrochlorothiazide, proton pump inhibitors. They're a very specific type of antacids, Prilosec, Protonix, omeprazole. All of those things I just named, these are not some obscure type. These are very commonly used medications. So we've got the dietary concerns, the farming concerns. Now you're on some of these meds. The bar is now higher. It's a higher bar to clear because you may be intaking the proper amount of magnesium, but there's not evaluation going on of what you're actually absorbing. All those medications are blocking the absorption of magnesium that you are intaking. High stress levels contribute as well.
Wow.
Also, anything with diuretic activity, alcohol, caffeine.
Okay, so it's hard to get enough from our diets, and even if you get enough, it's hard to keep enough within your body.
Yes.
So that makes supplementation a really good option.
It does. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Now, in terms of choosing one, I broke it down into 3 separate categories. First is just basic magnesium. Okay, so first of all, magnesium, just important to remember because we're going to talk about salt forms, and I think that can get a little, I don't want to turn this into a science discussion, but just the basics. So magnesium itself is an element. It's on the periodic table.
Yep.
In its pure form, it's a gray metal. Okay. So for the body to access magnesium, for a plant to contain magnesium, it's got to be bound to something. Okay. When it's bound to something, it's called a salt. So we think of salt, we think of table salt.
Yeah.
And salt is really just a broad term. So table salt is sodium chloride. It's a positive molecule and a negative molecule make a neutral. That's how the body can utilize it, and then it dissolves, etc. So that's an important thing, and that's why you can't. Well, I just want to take magnesium. Why does it have to have that glycinate or what that oxide? All that can be a little confusing. It must be bound because again, we're talking about a basic element. It must be bound and form a salt in order to be carried, absorbed, stored by the body.
Otherwise, your body would just process it straight out.
Yeah, and really, it would be a hunk of metal. I mean, there would be.
Fair enough.
Yes,
Don't eat metal.
That's why I started there. As odd as it is, that's to at least just emphasize the importance and the necessity, more appropriately, of why it is bound to something.
Okay.
So the most basic supplements that you're going to see on a pharmacy shelf: magnesium oxide, magnesium citrate. This is not to say that I don't want to get into bad and good. I'm just explaining the differences and leave it there. But magnesium oxide studies have shown that it's less absorbed in the gut than forms like aspartate, citrate, lactate, and chloride. So they can tell from the studies, they look at blood levels, and they can tell it's lower. It does not dissolve well. So the body cannot separate the magnesium from the oxide. Okay. Magnesium citrate's the other big one that you'll see. That's used in its standalone form as a laxative. So that's not your best bet in terms of a standalone product. So those are the basics and the issues with those. There are higher quality. We get a lot of people asking, oh, I just want magnesium glycinate. I just want magnesium malate. Those are good supplements. They are well absorbed. Again, documented to absorb better than oxide citrate forms with less GI side effects. Okay. So now you say, well, what's best? Best is not anything different than what I just named. Essentially, it's the combination.
Okay. All right.
Okay. And again, I think we try to be as open about supplements as we can. This is not the be all end all combination. It doesn't have all the ones I just named. Those are good ones too, the aspartate, etc. It's an excellent combination, the best one we know of and can access, and it's a great option for you. And here's why. So it contains citrate, malate, lysine, and glycinate. So I just talked about citrate and some issues there, laxative, right? Well, in low doses, it's highly ionic. Your body can absorb it, separate the magnesium for transport. So in lower doses, it is an excellent form and a good part of a combination. What the product actually does when it's alone, when it's just mag citrate, the product you'd see on the shelf, high dose. You basically overwhelm the body's ability to absorb it, utilize the side effect, because in this case, your body clears it via the colon and causes bowel movements. So you're literally using the side effect of magnesium citrate and what's technically a mega dose, can't absorb it. This is how the body does it. Oh, let's use that side effect as a over-the-counter drug.
Got it.
But in combination, in low dose, it's an effective, unique part of the combo.
Got it.
So what else? Malate. It's a Krebs cycle intermediate. Krebs cycle is just involved in cellular energy production, okay? It's the same form that's found in foods. It's highly absorbed. It dissolves well, okay? So it's a great option. It's malic acid is where the malate comes from. That's when malate is alone, it's malic acid. The other two are amino acids, lysine and glycine. You'll see them on the bottle as lysinate and glycinate. Again, just different pathways for the body to absorb. So what's critical, like I talked about, kind of the overloading of we'll call it the citrate pathway and the way your body would process magnesium citrate when it's in the gut. When you have lower doses of all of these different forms, the body is absorbing them in all different ways. The way that the body absorbs citrate is very different from the way it absorbs the amino acid, lysine and glycine forms, which is different than the Krebs cycle malate form. So you're not maximizing and overloading any of those pathways. Okay, your body can utilize all those different pathways to make sure that the magnesium you're intaking is actually absorbed.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and the other thing, it limits side effects. So any individual, specifically glycinate, can cause some abdominal pain and some nausea. So yes, that's a very good form. It's in our product. But when you take it alone to get enough magnesium, you've got to take a higher dose. Your likelihood of the side effects goes up. So and also the way your body processes and absorbs, it may be a little more efficient at absorbing one of those pathways or the other. So when you use the combination, that's what's really critical here. All of those individual components are not unique. It's the combination.
Got it. That's cool. Okay. What forms do we have? I know we've got a couple of different versions. We've got like a pill form and a powder, correct?
Yeah, still would primarily recommend the pill form because it has all of those combinations.
Okay.
The powder is only one form. That's essentially more of a product concern and a practical concern that for whatever reason you want to, take it in a liquid form. Mm-hmm. Not all of them dissolve as well. Okay. So that it's not that we didn't want them in the powder, we would prefer them in the powder. It's a literal product dissolving issue.
Okay, so the product, the powder one literally doesn't have all of these. It's not a combo product like the others.
Correct.
The Mag Essentials is the combination?
Absolutely, yes. Now, if you open that one up and try to dissolve it, that's where you have the issues. So that's why it's in a capsule and not available in the other form. So that's still absolutely the way to go.
Got it. Okay. What else do we need to know? Anything else?
I don't think.
What's a standard dosage for somebody looking to start taking magnesium?
Yeah. So in terms of starting taking it, you still want to be aware of, namely the one side effect that I mentioned of the citrate, especially if your body's kind of used to lower magnesium intake. You can overwhelm a pathway potentially. So I would just start with one capsule. And from there, after a couple days, go up to 2. Ideally with something like magnesium, and often supplements in general, you want to split the dose. So like 1 twice a day. The other thing we see very often is magnesium really is known as a calming nutrient to the body, both to the brain and to mood, but also to the heart rhythm, to blood pressure. It helps to relax the blood vessels. So you can take those, if you can take that at night, split it up, take it at night, it can help with any potential sleep concerns that you may have.
Very
so
cool.
At night, if you end up, you can probably go up to 3 a day, 1 in the morning, 2 in the evening. If night is your main concern, you're really just trying to get it on board for sleep without having to, take a medication or overdo the melatonin, whatever the case may be. You can move those to nighttime and get the dose that way.
Love it. Very cool. Excellent. I'm so glad we do these. I learned so much. Thank you. That's it for us today. If you want to catch up on any of the details that we talked about in this, look at the show notes down below. You can read all the articles. All the products we talk about are available on our website. That's askjoedimatteo.com, askjoedimatteo.com. That site is also where you can sign up for our newsletter. You can find past episodes of this show or the show that started all this, the Ask the Pharmacist show. Big thanks, as always, to all the folks that make this show happen. Josiah Schweinberg, Dante, Joey, myself, Tyler, Michael Deppish. There's a whole crew of people. I won't go into all the names. Thank you so much, guys. Share the show with somebody you know and love. That is the best thing you can do to help us to get the word out that this is a reliable source for information. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you again next time.